Welcome back to Ren Behind the Practice. I'm Sophie Campisi. If you've listened to the podcast before, you know that this show exists to bring forward the conversations that are usually happening quietly behind the scenes of our businesses. The uncertainty, the pivots, the experiments, the things we're trying to figure out as we build practices that are mission-driven, sustainable, and successful. Today's conversation is a little different. This is a Diagnostic Day episode. In these follow-up conversations, I reconnect with previous guests to explore what's happened since we last spoke, what's changed, what stayed the same, what they've been working on, what they've been questioning. Because one of the biggest patterns I see among practitioners, coaches, and healers is that we often spend months, sometimes years, trying to solve the wrong problems. And that is why we spend so much time, money, effort, and energy in our businesses, and we never see our efforts compound over time. My hope is that these Diagnostic Days conversations help bring more clarity, both for our guests and for those of you who are listening. Today, I'm joined once again by Haley Nelson. Haley, welcome back.
Hi, Sophie. Thank you.
After our last conversation, what's been on your mind the most?
Oh, man, that's a good question. What's been on the mind the most? I would have to say it's just really interesting that this has come up in this time, because with the last project I was working on, it completely just fell to the wayside for something better and new to come up. But I always do wonder, kind of why it fell apart the way that it did, just because I did spend so many years and so much time really on the ground working on that project. Just so much energy and investment, both financially and energetically, and time, and just so much sacrifice in order to get that project off the ground. And it always just kind of flatlined. It was really interesting to see that happen. And I never really understood why. In the end, something better did come along, but it really has been heavy on my mind to kind of try to understand why that happened after so much energy and time and investment and sacrifice was put into it. So that's been, really heavy on my mind.
Is there some particular aspect that has been taking up the most mental or emotional energy for you lately? Is this new pivot? If you want to give some context, that might be helpful. Is the new pivot completely separate and you're just curious about what happened to the last thing, or are they still intertwined? Why don't you give us some more context for this new pivot?
Yeah, absolutely. So previously, I was very passionate and heart-driven about working with people who were coming out of chronic homelessness, incarceration, and addiction. So my main target was recovery centers and facilities and working with those kinds of organizations. And I did so much data research and case studies and ministry work, basically working with people for free to try to help solve this crazy epidemic that we are seeing in the United States right now, and to try to understand what it was stemming from and how to solve it. And it took me, I think probably all said and done, just over 6 years from the initiation and the conception of really wanting to pursue that to the final day where it completely flatlined. It was just over 6 years of a lot of dedication work, pretty much putting everything else to the side to focus mainly on that issue, how I could solve it, how I could reach these people, what I needed to be integrated into their facilities, into their recovery centers, into these organizations, and then meet the foundations, meet with the boards, get approved, all of the things. It was a lot of work. And when I did that, I very much got huge insight into what the problem was and found the solution. And in the end, ironically enough, it's still flatlined, even after approval from boards, even everything. It was very strange to kind of see happen, because it literally just came to a very abrupt halt. And it was just gone, nothing. It was like I had done nothing for all those 6 years. And then the new project that came in was someone came to me to ask me to come work for their organization, to do the work for them, and ended up just skyrocketing. We already have over 800 students. We're already a few months into the project. It's a very long, extensive project. And to see the contrast of those two different demographics, it's like working with the United States and all of the human condition, the impoverished human condition we're seeing in the United States versus working in one of the poorest countries in Africa and seeing the difference of poverty in Uganda, Africa, and the difference of poverty in the United States. It's very, very, very eye-opening. And to me, it has been one of those things where the work is the same, the need is the same, the issue that the human is facing is the same, the deep poverty and impoverishment, but the acceptance of the solution is very different. In the United States, there was so much resistance. People almost literally fighting against me to deliver the solution to the people that needed it the most versus the people who are so open-minded and so hungry for the work that I do in one of the poorest countries probably in the whole world, if you want to get down to like third world countries and how they live. Seeing that all has been, wow, a little mind-blowing, and really helped me to see really that no work goes unrewarded, if you want to say it. So even though it didn't work out for the original demographic in the United States that I wanted to work with, it still somehow was delivered to me in a different form so that people are still benefiting from everything that was done previous to the conception of the delivery to the right group of people who actually wanted it. And just the reception level was really, it was very prominent and very obvious because it was like I was fighting tooth and nail to get these people to be receptive to this incredible solution that took me years to develop and years of study and just giving freely of my time and resources to people who are so hungry and so receptive to it. They were pursuing me so much that basically when it was time to approach the board with the offer and sign all the contracts, it was like a done deal. Like before I even created the offer, literally had to create an offer specifically for them. So it has been very interesting. And that's really been the main contrast there. And the main, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty, that those, just to see the difference between it has been, yeah, it has been really eye-opening.
Are you interested in exploring the, I guess you could say, why your personal project? I mean, you have like some inkling, but are you interested in exploring like why it flatlined and some of the things that were going on?
Yeah, I'd love to kind of dive into that and see what we could figure out because I came at it from a lot of different angles and a lot of different, I was pursuing a lot of different places and people, and it all just hit a wall with, like I said, it was almost like they were fighting me. They were so resistant to it. They were fighting me to even deliver any of it to anybody. It was almost like they didn't want people to know, or like, I don't know, maybe it was personal. I really don't know. It was, yeah, it was really interesting to see how that all worked out. It just ended up being just a massive void of nothing. It was really strange.
I do want to say, yeah, I'm curious to explore it more and see. I have some thoughts, but I, of course, want to let the conversation unfold more. But, so much of what you're saying doesn't surprise me. What you're saying, I hear over and over again, and I experienced over and over again when I was trying to run my practice and have these projects. It's like, I know I'm so good at the work that I do. I am building things that will solve this problem that I'm seeing. And so many things flatline. So I also know it firsthand, but even you using that word, the void, I find myself talking to people about that over and over again because people say I'm putting stuff out and it's like going to nothing. It feels like it's going into this big void of nothingness. And it is so real. One of the first questions that I have for you is obviously, 6 years. You were, like you said, you were trying things from a lot of different angles. But what did you think was the biggest thing standing in between you and getting that project and that work to a place of like success, whatever version we want to think about that? But let's just say it was working. You might have a few answers for that because it was such a long period of time. But what do you think, or what did you believe was the biggest thing standing in between you and success for that?
I would say the common denominator across the board was the gatekeepers, pretty much the people in power who made the decision on who got access to the people. So many times when you're working with that demographic of people, obviously, they're very poor. They're living in poverty. They're very impoverished, mind, body, spirit, very afflicted. So generally, the only way to get paid for working with that kind of demographic of people was to be in an organization that had all the certifications and the qualifications and the boxes checked in order to get funded either federally by grants or by insurance carriers, or if they were funded by like outside donors, which I've seen some places like that are funded by outside donors and supporters, right? So, in order to really be successful and make a living at that kind of work, because we all have bills, we all have things that require financial security. In the end, I needed to get paid. And I think the biggest barrier I faced with these places was those gatekeepers didn't want to give access to the people. It didn't matter what certification I got. It didn't matter who I knew. It didn't matter how many times I pursued them. It did not matter the data, the case studies, the results that I presented to them to get into the door. There was always someone who carried the power of the yes or no that ultimately said no. And it was really interesting because when you work with those kinds of people and you truly want to make a big impact, you need to do it on a bigger scale. And these are people you can't reach online. And so even if I went out and just met the people where they were at, which many times was literally on the street, literally in the soup kitchen, literally everywhere I could think of to access these people on my own, it wasn't enough momentum. It wasn't enough to do that on my own without starting my own foundation, my own center, my own, all these other things that in the end would end up being such magnitude of even more work. It just was like spinning my wheels. It wasn't going to give me enough momentum to actually make the impact to access these people to create the kind of solutions and results that are needed to actually make a dent and help what we're seeing happen in the United States today. So that problem, that was huge, because when you approach a facility or a foundation or an organization that has, a few hundred people, I'd say probably 50 to 250 people that they're serving at any given time, you need the board members, you need the people that make the decision, you need them to support you and want you to actually come do the work. And they just didn't. I mean, some of them were not even open to even hearing what I had to say because they already had a lot of their own systems in place, which obviously are failing at a massive rate. And if you try to tell them that or explain that to them or show them why and how your solution is better, they're very insulted by it, no matter how you approach it. And in the end, when those people who had the power of the yes or no came into play, it almost didn't matter what I had to offer them. their minds were made up that they didn't need anything better. They didn't need anything different. They didn't need anything additional, and that they weren't going to give me access to their people, and doing that all on my own just wasn't really a feasible goal, because there's so much that goes into those centers to even have a funnel of an influx of people coming in. It would have just been so many more years again of work. I wouldn't have even gotten to focus on what I do best to deliver to the people who needed it the most. So that was a huge issue. Yeah, that was a huge problem.
Was there anything, and this might not even be worth exploring, but was there anything that you tried to do about that? But the reason I say it might not be worth exploring, because this seems like the dead end. It seems like this was ultimately the dead end that had you have that realization of like, this is obviously not going anywhere, or at least not going anywhere in any amount of time that I have to be able to sit here. So is that essentially kind of the dead end that you hit the realization with?
Yeah, it was just, I felt like it was just a lot of wasted energy and time, and a lot of empty promises from people that ended up just not coming through on. And it ended up being, when I decided that, okay, I'm just going to step away from this for a while because there was nothing left to pursue, there was two different, very prominent gentlemen that I was speaking with that kept telling me, yes, 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 but there was never any action or follow through, like ever. And then I was chasing to be like, well, you said yes. Are you going to follow through on this? And there was never any follow through. It was just empty return every single time. There was the yes, but it was empty. I had pretty much sent out my very last offer letter to someone who had told me, yes, I can get you into contact with all of these people. Here's who they are. Yes, we can set up, he had a bunch of different radio outlets that he did. We can set you up with a show where we can discuss this, and you can reach my whole audience of all these people. I'll introduce you to all these people. And I said, great. And we spoke for several weeks. Okay. Several weeks, many phone conversations that probably went at least an hour each one. Okay. Where I explained everything that I do. He saw my heart for it, the purpose of the mission, the passion behind it, the qualifications, the groundwork, the case studies, the data, everything. And in the end, it came down to an email that had my letter in it so that he could give it to these people that he knew. And on our last phone conversation, I was sending the email to him. He said, great, I'll get back with you after I read it. And I literally never heard back from him again. No email back, no response, no text, no call, no, not literally dead air, flatline, nothing. And I'm just sitting here like, this is really interesting, because at the same time, another town that I had been pursuing as well that has a lot of these issues, and they're on like the cusp of basically just the domino effect and the crescendo of, okay, your issue is about to explode in your city. If you're seeing these signs, these are the precursors to what we already know is about to happen, because this is the, I guess, the sequence of events that happens before you get to this point. I'm reaching out to you because I've noticed these things happening in your community. And we know that these things lead up to this catastrophic event, basically, in this issue. So I spoke with the mayor. He was very open to hearing what I had to say, very open to setting up a meeting with me and all the things. And then it came down to our meeting and he didn't show up. And so I sent him a message, I understand you're a very busy man. No problem. We can reschedule this. I'm open. Just let me know, because basically, like, I would love to share with you what I have, because it's proven to be the solution for what you're about to face. Never messaged me back, never got with me again, never responded to another letter, email, message, phone call, literally nothing. And it was those two things that happened at the same time that I was like, finally, like, this is, I'm beating my head against a wall here. I don't even know how to approach this at this point anymore to get these people to hear how important this is, to take action on accepting what it is that I'm offering them, which is extremely valuable and is the solution to the problem. Like, it's extremely effective because we've seen it be extremely effective. But when it comes down to actually getting paid for it, actually holding a position to deliver it in the proper way to a multitude of people, it was just a hard no across the board. Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying. And first, I just want to say I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry that you've gone through that. I'm sorry it was so hard and that it's been so hard.
Thank you.
I believe in you. I believe in the work that you have. I believe in what you see in the solutions. And it sucks. It sucks to go through what you went through. You aren't alone, but it doesn't make it easier to have gone through that. So by no means am I trying to minimize that, because it sucks, and I'm going to tease apart some of this stuff to give you some, behind the scenes diagnostic clarity, hopefully, but also want to share. I have a similar story. Most people have some version of this story for, whether they're going straight to consumers and it's like, I have this thing and then people keep ghosting me. It's like, I know it can help them, but they keep ghosting me, or I'm putting stuff out and it feels like it's going to avoid, and like all of this. Personally, I in the past, I don't know if we talked about this, but I have a law degree. So I did NGO work and did juvenile criminal defense my third year of law school. But when I started my business and my practice, I started with two business models that essentially it went exactly like how yours went. So I wasn't really a direct-to-consumer service provider at first. Always was a holistic service provider and healer, but first I started with a business model that was more of a B2B type thing. And then it was schools. So it was adolescent mental health, very similar to what you're talking about, not in terms of the people and whatever, but the people I was having conversations with or trying to get meetings with schools. So heads of schools or counselors or the people who were in charge in ways of what is very important, adolescent mental health, and the kids in their schools, and the suicide rates are skyrocketing, and the mental health crisis and all of this. So similar to your story, the reason I stopped doing that was I ended up in the very exact situation that you did, which is like taking meetings and trying so hard to get meetings, and people find interest and they would never get back to me. It was just like that over and over again. So yeah, it sucks. It's frustrating. And I'm sorry it's been that way. Of course, for you, we have this little caveat that we know that your work is starting to work in a different context, but it doesn't take away what you went through and the frustration. So yeah, I just want to start by saying that. I'm sorry it's been like that.
Great. Thank you. Yes, that's a good word. It's extremely frustrating because it's like, it gives you a bit of a cognitive dissonance because these people are saying one thing and then they're not acting on it, or their actions are in complete contrast to what it is they're saying. And it's like, kind of messes with your mind a bit, because it's like, well, I know that you were interested. I know that you said yes. I know that we had connection and you understood what I was saying and you saw the results. Why is there no follow through? So I kind of had to put it at, on them, that they're the ones not following through. So something, wherever the disconnect is, whether it's in my form of delivery, I don't know, because obviously there was understanding and comprehension on their end on what is going on and how I can help and the results that are given. But in the end, whatever that was that kept them from, initiating the actual action was the same every single time.
Yeah. So, I mean, if with your permission to give some reflections, I'm happy to help tease us apart and hopefully get you some clarity.
Yeah, that'd be great because honestly, it really does. It messes with my mind because I was like there, but there was like nothing to grasp on to pull it all the way through or forward without the cooperation of these other people. And you can't fight people, you can't force them to cooperate. And eventually, I just had to walk away and just put it on the back burner and focus my energy and time elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. Unfortunately, what you went through on the business building side. So, right now, how I'm going to be sharing from is from the lens of startup lens, business building lens, business model lens, but also, of course, my background is similar to yours in ways. Of course, I'm a holistic practitioner, coach, healer, I'm a certified life coach, certified in lots of different things, but I have background in NGO work. So I specialized in international and comparative law when I was in law school, and I focused on human rights law and asylum law. So when I did NGO work, I was doing refugee law and asylum law overseas. I did some, like I mentioned, I did some juvenile criminal defense stuff, and adolescent mental health for a while was like a main focus of my business. And so I have that context too. So I'm gonna be looking at it from both sides, of course, like with, the business building expertise lens, but also like I've been through it on so many levels. So I've been through it in your way of what happens when you have something that you see that you're dealing with corporations, schools, bigger businesses, but also when you're a service provider, a coach, a practitioner, and you're dealing with individuals. It's similar in ways too. So I'm going to be looking at it from all those lenses. But yeah, again, unfortunately, what you went through is very predictable. And to start off with some of the distinctions, a big breakdown is, and this is kind of like the bread and butter of the work that I do when I describe it to people, is how to translate what we see as visionaries back down to real market demand. The translation is, how do we translate that, work it backwards to a real business model that will actually work? Because interestingly, it's actually quite difficult. The more of a visionary and a seer that we are, nailing the business model can actually be more difficult. And it's something that's just one of those backwards things, because we are typically have the highest values for integrity. The quality of the work matters. A lot of this stuff that makes us uniquely suited to be really good at creating offers, creating solutions, serving the population in need actually makes it even harder on the startup entrepreneur business building side. And again, that is one of the biggest problems, is how do we translate what we see as visionaries back to real market demand? How do we build a business model that can hold and support our work? Because in the end, the business model is necessary, because the business is what takes our work into the world. Whether we like it or not, the reality is in 2026, that is the vehicle that takes us deeper into our integrity, deeper into our mission, deeper into service, for exactly what you described, and what every single one of us listening will also understand. If we can't get the business to work, we're not doing the work. Like,
Yeah.
your solution isn't with the people who need it. Like, you're not spending time, you're spending time doing stuff that isn't being in the work. And that's part of why I'm passionate about what I do, because when people can't get their businesses to work, they aren't doing the work, right? Like, the people who they are here to serve aren't finding them, and vice versa. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem. We look at the state of the world, right? Like your pocket of the world, homelessness. And um, it's, you see the patterns. You said it, like you're a visionary, you see the patterns, you can very clearly see where something's headed. For you, it's second nature and logical and a no-brainer to say, hey, let's keep this from progressing. This would
Right.
solve the problem. Okay. This is one of those things that's like, when you are a visionary, unfortunately, inherent in being a visionary is there's going to be a gap.
Yeah.
And that's part of what's taking us all down, is no one is really teaching us how to navigate that gap in a way that has to just be really clear. Simple entrepreneurship is always going to be hard, but how to keep it from feeling like something's wrong. In your situation, I hear your story, I'm like, that's predictable. If you had someone that could have supported you through that, you wouldn't have gone through a lot of what you went through, but certainly we could have decreased the amount of, not saying that you had this, but I've been through it. So I know it's possible. Loss of confidence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shame.
It's discouraging.
And time, money, resources, and energy at the end of the day, 6 years.
Yeah.
That's normal for what I see. That's normal for what I went through. I was floundering with my business for at least that, but more like 8 before I found what I found. So yeah. And again, those are kind of some of the base level distinctions and translations that, when you say them, like this was predictable. We have very few people that know how to support visionaries who are also entrepreneurs and how to do exactly what I, have already said. How do we translate what we see as coming, what we see as possible to real market demand today and translate that into a business model that actually works and supports our work and doesn't take us out of our integrity, out of alignment, out of our values, and a lot of these certain sort of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts or comments before I keep going?
No, I think you had a really good way of saying that, because it really is, that's the gap. It's like, how do we get the person in the power to actually make the delivery happen? If they're not taking action, they're like, like I said, I can't force them to take action. I can't force them to actually give me the access to the people who really do need it. And then, yeah, in the end, those people are the ones that are suffering. Those people are the ones that aren't getting what they need because there is some sort of gap in how I'm delivering it to them to get them to say yes and take the action to open that door so that it can go through to the people who need it. It was the biggest barrier and the biggest challenge I ended up facing at the end, because I did even have boards say yes. And yet here I am not doing the work for those people because somewhere there was that disconnect on the actual execution of the project happening and being given to the people. So yeah, what you say makes a lot of sense.
So another, again, this is like technical business side, but the stuff matters. And again, we aren't being taught it. I want to start getting some of these phrases out for people to hear them, because these are the things that do matter. When it comes to, again, translating what we see, our gifts, our skills, and what we're here to do in this life to real market demand into that clear business model, we can't bypass that part. And so many of us get so far on pure grit and willpower and devotion because it's like we can't not see, we cannot abandon what's in us and coming through us. Kind of like, being pregnant. It's like there is one way this thing's going to go and it's going to come out of me. There is no way to just be like, oops, no, maybe let me try something else. Like anyone that's listening to this or that I talk to falls into this category of one of the things that makes it so different from building mission-driven businesses. It's not just, oh, here's a whole group of people that just wants to be entrepreneurs. So if this one doesn't work, okay, we'll just try the next thing. There is no, this is going to go away. So either we get it to work or we don't, but it's not going to go away. Absolutely. The cost is huge, right? The stakes are high on so many levels. And yeah, so anyway, what I started by saying is like, we need to figure out the business side. And so what I do, it's not sexy, and throwing out business technical terms. A lot of people, like, I don't want to, we can't get around it anymore. Again, like, it's just one of those things that we can't bypass. So this is like a technical term that I was never taught it. And I wish I had known this a long time ago when I was trying to deal with schools. If I had some of this technical understanding, I would have approached it differently, or maybe pivoted sooner and come about it at a different angle. But when it comes to business building and business model validation, there's a couple things going on in your specific thing. Like you were just talking about, you have the buyer and you have the end user. Sometimes that's the same. In situations like yours and situations like mine, when I was dealing with adolescent mental health, those are separate. And then sometimes you even have a third layer. So you have a decision maker, and then a buyer, and then an end user.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about business model and how to build, we need to be aware of things like this because all those things are at play when it comes to validating a business model. When I say validating a business model, what do I mean? It's like making sure this will work before we invest too much time, money, resources, and energy into something that's going to flatline at the end for a reason that could have been more predictable early on, or we could have worked with differently early on. And so these is one of those things, we want to be aware who our buyer is. Sometimes you have a decision maker that's separate from the buyer and then our end user. In a situation like yours, you probably had those three things, right? So you probably needed like board approval or something like that. So you needed approval, you needed some approval on some level, and that might not actually have been also who was the buyer. So who's actually then making the decision about what the budget is purchasing for that year. Then you're also dealing with corporation and a business where you have to think they're not a normal consumer. A consumer can spend money today and start the program tomorrow. But sometimes these corporations are planning out 12 months or 24 months. So their buying cycles are also different. So you also have like that at play. And then you have your end user. So in your case, for instance, your end user might not have had a say, right? But they matter, but maybe they didn't have a say.
Right. Yeah.
Versus, for instance, my case when I was working with adolescent mental health. Just to give another example, if I was going straight to parents, because I tried both angles. So I tried schools and I tried parents. If I'm working with adolescents, I don't only need their buy-in, I also need their parents because their parents are the buyers, right? I can't have just one and not the other. So now I needed two because even if the parents are on board, like, yes, I need something for my child. There's this crisis. I'm scared. There's suicides happening. I also need the end user's buy-in. There's nothing right or wrong about that, but it does make it more difficult. Do you see how, like, on the business model side, it makes it more difficult?
Yeah, absolutely. This is amazing. Thank you. This is
So in
like
your
you are
situation,
like
okay.
blowing my mind.
So
So
in
yeah,
your situation, you had multiple layers of that, right? You
yeah,
might have had at
absolutely.
least three when you have like, okay, you need board approval, but then it's like, who's actually running the center? Okay. You might
Right.
have needed
Exactly.
someone's approval actually running that center. And then you might have had someone underneath that was actually making decisions about programming. So
Right.
like in a context like that, again, like we don't need to like tease that apart necessarily, but just to give you context for, you might have needed 4 levels of approval for people to line up and get yeses. It's a very hard business model to start with.
Yeah. Wow.
It doesn't set you up really, your chances of success are just much smaller early on. Early on. You can and will get there usually. And I'm going to just like show you this diagram really quickly. People who are listening aren't going to be able to see this or just taking notes. But you see these little curves I have here. These are kind of called S curves. Usually we'll get to something like that here. It's not to
Hmm.
say you wouldn't have gotten to it, but it wouldn't have been the best place to start because that's a really, really hard business model to nail, especially early on. That's usually much easier after you nail the first couple, and then you have a lot more leverage, you have a lot more buy-in. It's going to take a lot less convincing, and you'll get there eventually. But usually, as visionaries, healers, all of the people, again, that I connect with, who I am, who you are, we tend to go the place that has the most need. That tends to be something that pulls us really hard at the beginning. And it's not always the easiest place to start when it comes to translating what we see as possible to like the real market demand right now and also what's going to set us up for success. And so usually, when I'm working with people and I guide them, it's like we will work that backwards. That's not going out of the window. It's not ever going to go away, but how can we work it backward even more to get your starting place set you up for more success so that you can nail that first business model, have momentum, have money, have leverage, have all these things coming before you start tackling business models that are harder
Hmm.
to tackle.
Yeah. Wow. That clarity is wow. Thank you so much. That is unbelievably spot on. Exactly what I needed to hear. And I mean, that's And like now that you say that, I can see it absolutely, because it would come down to a spot that maybe I thought was a wall, but it was maybe just another step of something I needed to learn to elevate myself to actually get to over this part to get to the next one. So you've actually given me a little bit of inspiration, been a little bit of a catalyst to kind of like explore that more, to see if it's something that is still feasible to achieve, because like you said, like it does not go away. Like I may have had to change directions a little bit in who I'm serving because they're more open and receptive to it. But that was because I can't say I really truly believe that it was God who did it. God lined it all up to get me past all of those things. But I think if I really wanted to work here in the United States with the people that I'm really truly passionate about helping and serving, those are definitely things I'm going to have to learn so that I can elevate to those places to get to that end goal and result. And without having this conversation, I would have never seen that or known that was really, that's the simple answer for a very obviously challenging and complex thing to do. But, we're not here for ease. We're here for challenge and to actually solve problems. And sometimes those are not easy to do. So, wow. Thank you. That was phenomenal. That was actually like, I mean, you had it spot on. That's exactly it. But I just couldn't see it. And when you show me that diagram, wow, like that just really shows me that I probably didn't hit a wall of end. I probably just hit a wall of, this is where I need to elevate. This is where I need to learn and educate myself further so that I can get to the next level. And maybe I will see this come to full fruition in the US. That would be pretty amazing. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Anything else before we wrap up today that you want to add?
Not really. I do know that it's possible, obviously, because people are doing it. And we know that we're smart. We know that we are capable. And we know that we were put here. This purpose was put into our minds and our hearts for a reason. And like you said, like it really is like a pregnancy. Like this is going to come out one way or the other. And maybe I'm just not done gestating yet.
Yeah. And I think, something that I want to add is like, you just don't know what you don't know. And what's missing from so much of these conversations out there is like, we aren't building normal businesses. And generally the businesses that we're trying to build are actually pretty hard because they are true startups and they don't fit into a clear box. And if we don't have the distinctions or the guidance of how to navigate that process, it's almost impossible to do it. But no one's talking about it enough. And we keep thinking like we should just be able to figure it out. It's the quickest way, for lack of a better phrase, to like go straight to the startup graveyard. And the reason, again, I'm so passionate about this is because these aren't normal businesses. We need these businesses to work because we need work like yours to get out into the world. And so, yeah, so you didn't know what you didn't know. And most people don't know what they don't know. And I didn't for a decade, which is why I fought tooth and nail to discover what I ended up discovering, which even when I did it, started consuming and studying and exploring and learning and apprenticing in the startup world. And I started studying under tech startup experts because it was like, this is what I was not told. And this, it doesn't translate exactly. I have to do work to translate it, but it's like what we have in common usually is what happens when you see something that's out in the future that isn't here yet. And
Yeah.
it creates a unique situation for business building. And people aren't teaching us how to do it. So many people are telling us what to do with the cupcake once it's baked and iced. Here's how you sell it. Here's how you go do it. But very few people are actually guiding us through and showing us the process for how to get from, usually us as working it backwards, how to get from what we see as possible, Bridget, to real market demand right now. And then how to navigate the business building process and the startup process within that, because those things, all these distinctions, like you said, before I even went into it, it's what I said, it's something that I wish I had these distinctions sooner. You probably were like, wow, that would have been really helpful to know. Like, a long time ago. But I just want to say, like,
Right.
you you didn't know what you didn't know. You're not doing anything wrong, and you didn't do anything wrong on purpose. The same way I did for a decade trying to figure it out until I was like, wait a second. If what I was trying was going to work, it would have worked. If the people I were hiring was going to work, it would have worked. And I've invested tens of thousands of dollars or more into my business and nothing is working. At what point am I going to say, like, none of this is going to work? What's missing? What's that missing piece? So that's why I ended up doing. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here to continue the conversation. And one of the reasons that I really love these follow-up conversations is that they remind us that clarity doesn't happen in a vacuum either. Instead, it comes from paying attention. Even think of where you were from the first conversation to now. It's like, it's not just in this one moment. It's questioning our assumptions, noticing patterns, being willing to see things that were difficult to see before, that we weren't able to see before. So thank you. Thank you for showing up.
Wow. Yeah. I actually kind of love the way it all transpired there, because who would have ever known that we would have a second conversation and that things would have happened the way that they did in the meantime to be completely relevant for this conversation. And honestly, it just kind of reignited the fire for me to pursue that so that I could still, have the possibility of success and actually achieving this thing in the United States, because I know that people are receptive to it. I know that people want to know it, because every time I talk about it, people are very interested. It's just exactly that, closing the gap to get it to the people that need it the most, and also support my life. My kids have to eat. I have to pay my bills and all that stuff. And so many people just expect, because we are so giving, I think people just expect us to just constantly give. But there comes a point where we do have, for some reason, healers, we want to give so much without the expectation of really receiving. But there comes a point when we do have to receive as well. And it does have to be financially, because the dollar is the way that the world works. So that was really helpful. Thank you for
Yeah. Yeah.
putting it in that way that I could see exactly, like, this is how I need to frame it so that it can be delivered properly. And I could see now completely exactly what it is I need to do to have that happen. So thank you. I really, really
Yeah.
appreciate your time for that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're so welcome. And really, like, let's talk again. If you are really serious about doing it, let's talk again, because I want to make sure that you have the tools that you need. Like, it's important. And building a business, it's really, really hard. And you know what can happen if you spend a lot of time and money and resources and energy. It doesn't always translate into the business model working. And there are ways to, like, what I show people is there is no one size fits all business model. I don't know sitting here what that's going to look like for you. I believe that it can happen in the United States. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but there is a predictable pattern for how to go through the steps and what you need to know and how to think about the building process so that you can decrease the amount of risk, right? Like, risk is wasted time, money, resources, and energy, confusion, breakdown, like all of the things. It's like learning to play violin. It's like, if we've never done it before, why would we know how to do it? Startup entrepreneurship is one of the most difficult things that there is to do. So many of us are going in without real support. Yes, there's business coaches out there, but they don't have the distinctions that we need. And so if I could do one thing, it would be like, I wish I had, when I was starting, the support that I now know is out there for actually, like, how to navigate. So yeah, everything that you said, it is possible. It's possible in the United States. And there are ways to decrease the amount of risk that go into building it. So that is possible.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I almost want to cry right now, because that was so insightful and so helpful. And who would have known that it's exactly what I needed to hear today to continue the work? Because as exciting as it is to be working with such a great organization, in Uganda, Africa, to help some of the poorest people on the face of the planet, I also want to impact right outside my front door, because this is America. We shouldn't be experiencing the things that so many people are experiencing here. And it just, we don't want to see those things. We don't want to see people literally going through what they're going through on the streets in what was one of the most Canadian. So I'm an immigrant here. So I see the privilege of the United States and everything that it stands for and all the hard work that as an immigrant, Americans are just privileged to. But we have to work really, really hard to have access to those privileges. And for me to see these people on the side of the street living the way that they're doing in what was one of the richest countries in the entire world, it shouldn't be happening. And if they were only to see what many of us immigrants and people who actually do take advantage of the privileges of America, they would not be in that position. And it really is just, it's a very simple solution if you can get over, like you said, the hurdles of translating it so that it is accessible. And that's really, it's still just so heavy on my heart to do. So yeah, thank you. This was very, very valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And thank you again for joining us. And for anyone that's listening, thanks for joining us. If you recognize yourself somewhere in today's conversation, I'd love to hear from you. And you can find Haley's previous episode linked in the show notes. So check there if you want to go back and listen to her first episode. So thank you again, Haley. Thank you for listening, everyone that's listening. And we will see you all next time on Ren Behind the Practice.